Hi everyone, this is Joseph at Lightspeed. When we look at sales reports over time, when we segment the time, there's not a built-in way in analytics to look at cumulative totals. So let's say, for example, we wanted to look at a report where we see the totals for January in the first column, the totals for January and February in the second column, and then the totals for January, February, and March in the third column. We can use calculations to prepare this type of analysis, and I'm going to show you how. So there are a few steps to preparing this group sales totals. First, we'll begin with a simple sales report. Second, we're going to pivot on the time frame. Third, we'll be looking at building a pivot offset list. Fourth, we'll be finding the sum of that pivot offset list. And fifth, we'll just be hiding the raw data. So step one, we'll begin with a simple sales report. So let's start building a new report from scratch. To begin, let's look at sales results, let's say from the past 3 months. Let's say our dimension will be our store location. And let's say our measure will be the number of sales. Let's run. So far, so good. Step two, we'll pivot on the time frame. Our report is looking at the past 3 complete months. So let's pivot on the month. And we'll run. So now we have 3 columns on the report, one for each count of sales per month per store. Step 3 will be to build a pivot offset list and referencing the pivot column. So a pivot offset list is a calculation that we'll enter from the custom fields as a new table calculation. And we'll start looking for pivot offset list. So a pivot offset list needs 3 arguments. The first is what measure are we going to be looking at? So in our case, we'll be looking at the number of sales. I'll start typing the word sales, and we see it come up here. We're going to follow that with a comma. The second argument in pivot offset list is how many columns to the right do we want to start our list in? In our case, we want to start progressively over to the left. This means in column 1, we want to start 0 columns to the left. In column 2, we want to start 1 column to the left. In column 3, we want to start 2 columns to the left, and so on. So a way that we can create this, moving to the left, is starting with a negative number, and that negative number will be the pivot column minus 1. We'll follow that number by a comma, and our third argument will be the pivot column itself. This means in column 1, we'll get 1 result. In column 2, we'll get 2 results. In column 3, we'll get 3 results, and so on. Finally, let's give this a more meaningful title. We'll call this List of Sales. And let's save. So let's test this. Here in our first column, we see that 1,606 sales took place, and our calculation is returning 1,606. Here in our second column, it's returning 1,606 and 1,484. Here in our third column, it's returning 1,606, 1,484, and 1,379. So our pivot offset list is working. Step 4 will return the sum of that pivot offset list. To illustrate this, let's make a copy of the original list of sales by clicking on the gear icon and choosing Duplicate. This will just make a copy of our original calculation. Let's edit it though. We'll go back to its gear icon and we'll click Edit. So we're going to take this list, but we're going to put before it the key for sum, following by one more closing bracket to complete this function. And let's change its title. And save. So let's test this. Again, in column 1, the sum of the list is the same number as our one result. In column 2, our list returns 1,606 and 1,484. The sum provided is 3,090. Our third column returns 1,606, 1,484, and 1,379. The sum returned is 4,469. So it looks like our calculation is working. Finally, step 5 is to hide the raw data. A good way to monitor this is to open up the visualization of the report just above the data. Oh, and right now this wants to be a column chart, so let's change it to being a table. So we don't want to see the actual number of sales. We can't remove it from the report because our calculation needs to see it. But we could hide it from the final report by clicking on its gear icon and choosing Hide from Visualization. Now we don't actually need the list of sales on the report at all. It's implicit now in the cumulative sales. So I'm going to click on its gear icon and we'll just delete. Analytics will ask if we want to delete it and we'll say OK. So now we have one final report that lists the cumulative totals, count of sales by store over the last 3 months. So there are some next steps that we can use to maximize this report. First of all, we can always change the dimension to determine what we're looking at over time. Instead of looking at the store, we might want to look at a brand, a vendor, an employee, a category. We also might want to measure change in velocity. So something that represented 10% of our sales in January might represent 15% of our sales in January and February. And third, choosing actions. What we're measuring, is it getting faster or slower? Is it changing its position? And because of that, do we need to change what we're ordering, who we're coaching, who we're working with, or what our opening hours are? So thank you for watching this video on group sales totals. You can find more resources in our Video Help Center and in the Analytics section on Community.